Good evening, everyone. The Durham Public Schools Board of Education work session is now in session. At this time, we wish to extend a warm welcome to everyone who is joining us this evening. The purpose of this meeting is to inform our parents, staff, and constituents about the work aligned with our mission to embrace, educate, and empower every student to innovate, serve, and lead. The interpreters for tonight are Martha Romo Urgiles and Marty Ramirez. Thank you for taking the time to join us. I want to say good evening to our colleagues online, Board Member Lewis and Board Member Valladares.
And good evening.
Okay, I'm sorry, Ms. Valladares is not online, but Ms. Lewis is. Thank you, I heard you. The next item on our agenda is a moment of silence. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the agenda review and approval.
Move approval of the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion from Ms. Umstead, seconded by Ms. Byer. All those in favor? Oh, we have to do a roll call vote.
Is there any other
Is
discussion?
there any other discussion? Now we'll do a roll call vote because we have virtual members joining us. We'll start with Ms. Lewis,
Aye.
Ms. Byer.
This is Javanya Lewis and I vote aye.
Thank you. Ms. Byer,
Aye.
Ms. Carter-Otten,
Aye.
Ms. Chavez,
Aye.
Ms. Umstead,
Aye.
and I vote aye, so it passes 6-0. And now we'll entertain a motion for the work session minutes to be approved from October 12th, 2023.
Of the minutes from October 12th, 2023. Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Chavez, seconded by Ms. Carter-Otten. We'll have a roll call vote, Ms. Lewis. Any
This is
discussion?
and this is Javanya Lewis. I vote aye.
Aye.
Ms. Carter-Otten,
Aye.
Ms. Chavez,
Aye.
Ms. Umstead,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Passes 6-0. We are now at the point in our agenda where we have public comment. Have 5 comments for this evening. We're going to do a quick review of the rules. First, please state your name. If speaking for an organization, please state your name and the name of the organization. Speakers are asked to present their comments in 3 minutes. When the yellow light comes on, you have 1 minute left. Not written in. To start winding up your remarks. When the red light comes on, it will beep, which indicates your time is up. Complaints about named staff, students, or parents should not be voiced in open session. However, we are very interested in hearing your concerns with regard to public education, safety of our students, or the operation of the school system. Finally, board members will listen carefully and consider your comments, but we do not engage in discussion with speakers. Our first speaker tonight is Sally Harbold, followed by Abby Bender.
My name is Sally Harbold, and I'm participating with Public Schools Strong, and I attended the August board meeting. Probably my most important identifier is to tell you that 38 years ago, I accidentally fell in love with a woman. And 38 years later, we are still together. We are both Episcopal priests, and we're on the staff of the same church when we met. And it's been a rough road. The church in Florida did throw us out, but the church in North Carolina embraced us and welcomed us. And I was embarrassed and ashamed to say that I'm a Christian after I heard the speakers at the August meeting seemingly representing themselves as people who speak for God and of God, and really shaming other people and blaming other people. So I want to stand up for the children and the parents of children who are questioning their identity, questioning their relationships. Not that the school board has a role in encouraging that, but in accepting it and let them be who they are and not be dominated by a very hateful, far right-wing agenda. And if there's anything that I can do to support and help in the public schools, I will. Thank you. Thank you for your work.
Hello, my name is Abby Bender. I am a DPS parent of 2 kids, one of which is non-binary, and I'm a member of Rainbow Collective for Change. SB 49 is a state law that violates a federal law, Title IX. It does this by creating an environment within schools that is hostile to an entire group of students, by taking away their representation in curriculum, potentially putting them in an unsafe family situations, and taking away potentially the one place that they are able to be their authentic self. The language in the law is unclear, and by adding this language to any DPS policy, you would be giving teachers freedom to act according to their personal beliefs in a way that could put students at risk. Teachers that want to provide a safe space for their students would be in a position where they have to choose between following a federal law that protects them and violating a state law or even DPS policy that could cause harm. As a group, many of us started coming to school board meetings to advocate for safety and clarity from DPS to protect this group of kids. If you proceed with this change, you would be taking a giant step back from this intended goal. At my own child's gender support meeting this year, all 3 teachers in attendance were very confused as to what they were allowed to, if they were allowed to correct misuse of my child's pronouns, if they were allowed to talk about their gender in the classroom, or even protect them from harassment and bullying because of their gender. The clarity that teachers need to keep these students safe has not been provided. Parents and students themselves should not be the ones providing this education. I come here acknowledging my privilege to show up and advocate, and my child's relative privilege to many other LGBTQI kids because they have a safe home and community. I'm here because there are too many others that don't have anything close. I ask that you put a pause on any edits that would encompass SB 49 into DPS policy while the legal battle is ongoing, and instead provide clarity to teachers and principals that will keep these kids safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next 2 public speakers are Ann Stakawi Hemstreet and Alex Adrian.
Hello, DPS board members and administration. My name is Ann Sakawi Hemstreet. My pronouns are she or they. And I'm a queer parent of 2 young children residing in Durham. I am also the founder and executive director of Rainbow Collective for Change. And I'm here today to share my support for any and all procedures that Durham Public Schools implements to protect and affirm LGBTQIA+ transgender and gender nonconforming students, staff, and families across the district. I also urge you to provide clear and thorough guidance through written communication and training to all staff across the district schools, so they are clear what constitutes discrimination, how they will be held accountable if they discriminate against LGBTQIA+ and gender diverse students or colleagues, and what they are still expected to do to affirm and support LGBTQIA+ and gender diverse students and staff. I recognize that you are in a difficult position where you want to affirm and support all of your students, including those who are LGBTQIA+ and gender diverse, but also need to comply with the state's SB 49 law, knowing that it is intended to create hostile learning environments for those already vulnerable students. I know you are talking this evening about adding language to several policies to demonstrate your compliance with SB 49. It hurts my heart to see the SB 49 language added into the DPS policy 3540 that bans instruction on sexual activity, sexuality, or gender identity for grades kindergarten through 4th grade. Every student has a right to see their own identities and their own family represented in the school curriculum. They also have a right to learn about identities and families that are different from their own. To represent some identities and families while suppressing or censoring others is a form of indoctrination and a violation of SB 49 itself, as well as raising Title IX concerns and violating state and district policies on school curriculum. Furthermore, SB 49 states that a parent has the right to the following: to direct the education and care of his or her child, it should say their child, by the way, and 2, to direct the upbringing and moral or religious training of his or her / their child. How do you, DPS, plan to comply with this for all parents? What about LGBTQIA+ parents and parents of LGBTQIA+ children? We should also have the right under this law to direct the education and care of our children. I urge you to accompany any policy changes with specific guidance and training for educators on 1, the district's recommended practices for affirming and supporting LGBTQ and gender diverse children, and 2, the procedures in place to hold school staff accountable when they are over complying with SB 49 and discriminating against these students.
Hi, I'm Alex Adrian. My pronouns are they and he. I am on the leadership team of Rainbow Collective for Change. I live in Durham, and I am the parent of 2 adults, former DPS students. I am employed by the LGBTQ Center of Durham, though I am not here as a representative of the center today. I understand that today you are looking at how to implement NC-SB 49, the I Don't Say LGBTQ law. While I know it is actually entitled Parents' Bill of Rights, I recognize that it leaves out the rights of many parents and families. It attempts to silence equity, diversity, autonomy, and safety. Several provisions of SB 49 lead to a hostile educational environment for LGBTQ+ students, staff, faculty, and families, including the piece the DPS board is discussing today in Policy 3540 about the Comprehensive Health Education Program. Every student has a right to see their own identities and their own families represented in the school curriculum. They also have a right to learn about identities and families that are different from their own. To represent some of the identities and families while suppressing or censoring others is a form of indoctrination and a violation of SB 49 itself, as well as raising Title IX concerns and violating state and district policies on school curriculum. Creating a hostile educational environment breaks Title IX, a federal law. Federal law supersedes state law. The Campaign for Southern Equality is in discussion with the North Carolina State Public Department of Instruction on this issue and will be likely filing a federal complaint with the Office of Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Education. And I know that you as a board and your lawyers are staying abreast of these possibilities. I know that each of you take to heart Durham Public Schools' mission to embrace, educate, and empower every student. SB 49 does not make this possible, and it is illegal. In an ideal world, I would ask that our district stand in defiance of this law. Short of that, I ask that when reviewing proposed policy, please use a lens that will allow for restrictions written into the policy to easily revert or revise to more inclusive language or be removed altogether when it is proven that SB 49 is not enactable. Finally, SB 49 itself requires you to develop these policies in consultation with parents, teachers, administrators, and community partners. One public comment period is not sufficient, particularly in an environment so that is not safe for many to speak. As a member of the board's LGBTQIA task force, I am left to wonder why the task force members have not been called upon to engage in the development of these policies. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Antonia DiNardo, followed by Carolyn Allen.
Hi, my name is Antonia DiNardo. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm here to speak to you as a mother of 2 primary school age children, a fellow educator, and a transgender woman. There was no education on queer topics when I was in school, but that didn't mean that I didn't learn about them. I learned about them every time kids played Smear the Queer in gym class with the full approval of watching staff. I learned every time other kids made dehumanizing comments about trans women. They reduced us to pornographic objects or called us he, she's, and trannies. I learned every time I was beaten up and called homophobic slurs, because we live in a culture that is steeped in homophobia and cis-sexism, and as long as I have been alive, schools have been no exception. LGBT affirming education has not suddenly introduced knowledge of queerness to the schoolyard. It has just, for the first time, given the responsibility of teaching about queer lives and queer experiences to educators instead of to bullies. For the first time, queer youth get to learn that they are people, normal and whole and deserving of dignity rather than outsiders and punching bags. I often wonder how my life would have changed had I had that experience. Perhaps I would have come to terms with who I was sooner. Perhaps I would have been spared years of self-loathing, trauma, and pain. Because make no mistake, none of that bullying could ever have accomplished the great conservative dream of making me not trans. All it did was cause me pain, a pain that millions of American youth are now facing the prospect of repeating. Many of the people speaking in opposition to these changes ask you to press pause on these changes, to wait and see how SB 49 plays out in the courts before making any changes to DPS policies. I don't, because I don't care what the courts say, and neither should you. I have come to urge you to rip this policy to shreds, to unequivocally say we will not comply, not today and not in January, because that is how progress is made, not at the hands of a politicized judiciary carefully curated by right-wing extremists for 3 decades, but at the hands of good people willing to say no, willing to disobey what we know is wrong. No, we will not allow bullies to control our education system, not in the schoolyard, not in the state house, where the same bullies who pushed us around as kids are all grown up in suits and ties pretending to care about our children. No, we will not let LGBT youth become second-class citizens. No, we will not acquiesce to a law that does meaningful, tangible harm to vulnerable children. No moral panic, no legislature, no court will stop this board from doing what is right, from making sure our children get to learn through high-quality, evidence-based, inclusive education, not at the hands of bullies, because that is what ethical, responsible education demands. Thank you.
My name is Carolyn Allen. I work at Sandy Ridge Elementary, and I'm the proud parent of 4 DPS students. I'm speaking tonight for myself and my family. I understand that you'll be discussing proposed policy changes this evening in response to SB 49. As you may know, the NC General Assembly passed the 2023 budget, which pushes implementation of SB 49 to January of next year. So no one is required to be implementing changes to policies or practices just yet. A lot of folks in our schools aren't aware of this. In fact, there are some that believe that the DPS LGBTQIA+ and gender support policy is outdated due to SB 49 and therefore should no longer be followed. We need clear communication from DPS administration to all DPS employees and families that this is not the case. We need to hear clearly and plainly stated that DPS continues to assure the protection of our staff and students by following the current DPS LGBTQIA+ and gender support policy. I worry that the changes that have been proposed here tonight are too vague and leave too much room for interpretation from one school to the next, from one employee to the next. The revisions to 3540 read, instruction on sexual activity, sexuality, or gender identity will not be included in the health education curriculum in kindergarten through 4th grade. Now, when I wrote this, I originally said that sounds fine to me,
with the caveat of now, I've heard some really good explanations tonight why that's not fine. However, teachers discuss information in their classrooms that isn't quote unquote included in the curriculum all the time, right? And the proposed changes say this restriction does not include responses to student initiated questions, which mirrors SB 49's language. Perfect. So the policy just says those things can't be included in the official curriculum, not that teachers can't discuss it with their students, correct? But I feel certain that not everyone will read and interpret that in the way that I just did. And therein lies the problem. Please be direct and give us more guidance that doesn't leave room for interpretation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. That's our last general public comment. I'm now going to turn it over to our chief of staff for our policy update.
Thank you. Good evening, board members, Dr. Mabanga, community members. If you could please pull up the PowerPoint. And while they're pulling that up, what we're going to do here today is I tried to kind of summarize some of the changes that are in the policies. They are and have been available on the board docs website for review for the community to see. And I do want to make it clear that the board members have engaged with me in really robust conversations regarding these proposed edits. And these are kind of those synthesized comments and what we are presenting to the board for their review on first reading today. Next slide, please. The policies that will be discussed today and with the proposed edits include policy 3210, parental inspection of and objection to instructional materials, policy 3540, comprehensive health education program, policy 4335, criminal behavior, policy 4720, surveys of students, policy 6120, student health services, and policy 7300, staff responsibilities and code of ethics. Next slide, please. So what I've done in the PowerPoint is I'm showing the track changes as they appear in the documents, and then afterwards, because that's somewhat confusing, I went ahead and showed it as it would look if all of the track changes were included. So this is just so people can see what, if they don't have access to or didn't have a chance to review the documents that are in board docs with the agenda. Next slide, please. And this is policy 3210. So what the gist of this, the changes are that are being made include just basically codifying parents that how they can inspect and review instructional materials in regard to their particular child or student in Durham Public Schools. At the end, you will see I've done in black, the language that was already in existence in the policy, and in blue is the proposed changed language. Next slide, please. And this is what all of those strikeouts would look like if they were accepted by the board. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to read it, but I do just wanted everyone to have a chance to kind of see what it would look like without all of the strikeouts. Next slide, please. This is policy 3540, comprehensive health education. Again, the language in black is what has already existed in the existing, as the existing policy reads. And then the last two sentences in blue, instruction on sexual activity, sexuality, or gender identity will not be included in the health education curriculum in kindergarten through fourth grade. And then it directs them to policy 1310/4002, parental involvement. And then the last sentence, this restriction does not include responses to student initiated questions. Next slide, please. Policy 4335, criminal behavior. This codifies the requirement in the Parents' Bill of Rights that if a school system employee becomes aware of a possibility of a criminal offense having been committed, what they are to do. And I believe, next slide, I believe I did do. This is what the language that is being added includes. So again, this is fairly takes almost directly from the language of the statute. Next slide, please. Policy 4720, surveys of students. Just in summary, what the Parents' Bill of Rights requires, it now makes surveys that include protected topics or areas. Parents have to opt into those. Previously, they were opt out. And now there's a list that's in the entire policy that's included in the packet that lists what those protected areas are. So if a survey includes any of those, the entire survey becomes a protected survey and parents would have to opt into that. There are two exceptions to this that do include protected information, and those are listed here, the youth risk behavior and the youth tobacco survey. Next slide, please. In addition, the Parents' Bill of Rights also added language regarding well-being questionnaires and health screenings, and the language is included in the packet and on this slide as well. And it's also addressed in policy 1310, parental involvement. Next slide, please. Policy 6120, this is not a Parents' Bill of Rights change, but in reviewing the policies, it was discovered that the policy needed to be updated as a result of a previous change from the State Board of Education. So this isn't Parents' Bill of Rights, but we are presenting it to the board for its review to make the policy compliant with state board policy. Next slide, please. And lastly, policy 7300, staff responsibilities and codes of ethics. The proposed language in blue indicates that, as the statute does, that employees are to support parents in participating in their child's education and are not to encourage or coerce a child to withhold information from a parent. The yellow dots indicate there's a paragraph in there that was, there were no changes made to that. And then the next area is that regards recording audio recordings and video recordings of students. Next slide, please. Can you go back to the previous slide? It appears that there's a missing slide. I don't know what happened to it, but what this does, it lists out the areas, the exceptions to, and it's included in the packet, but it lists out the exceptions to the prohibition on recording, including purposes of instruction, extracurricular activities, all of the things that we generally do in our school buildings are still allowed under this law. So we are complying with the law in stating that the only time staff are allowed to record students is in those particular areas. And just for the, excuse me, I'll go ahead and read those. Not into the record per se, but just so that for people that are watching, so that they can know exactly what those exceptions are. The language reads, additionally, a video or voice recording shall not be made of a student without the parent's prior written consent, except a recording made in the following circumstances. A, during or as part of a court proceeding, as part of an investigation under Chapter 7B or Chapter 14 of the General Statutes. C, when the recording will be used solely for any of the following purposes. 1, a safety demonstration, including one related to security and discipline on educational property, an academic or extracurricular activity. 3, classroom instruction. 4, photo identification cards. And 5, security or surveillance of buildings, grounds, or school transportation. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And those are the policies that we are bringing for the board's first reading. And just wanted to again reiterate that we did have a robust conversation with all of the board members regarding these proposed changes and in consultation with Darrington Smith, the board's attorney.
Thank you so much, Dr. Giovanni. Board members? These policies are in front of us for review as a first read. Any comments?
Ms. Giovanni, could you speak to plans to have community engagement and feedback on these drafts?
Yes, as we, back in 2019, when we did the policy transition, my email is on the board docs, policy page for anyone who ever wants to provide any type of feedback for policies. And this is generally how we do get feedback from the community on policies. So this is on for first reading. It would be the request of administration that the board allow us to move it to second reading at the November board meeting. And not maybe put it on consent, but in the event that there is some feedback from the community through that email to me, then I would then share that with the board, and or if the board directly received any feedback, to share it with me, and then I could put that into a PowerPoint and allow for, again, that open public discussion. So that's with regard to these 6 policies. There will, and I believe there will be some additional commentary on policy 1310, as the statute does require an actual, like a robust parental, formal parental or community engagement on that policy.
And I'm happy to speak to that now. Parents' Bill of Rights requires us to consult with parents, teachers, administrators, and community partners about the development of our new policy 1310. I think this is a practice that Durham does often when we craft and draft policies, that we engage with our community, whether that's through public comments, through emails to staff, or emails to board members, which we've already begun to receive from folks in the community. So thank y'all for communicating with us. The draft of the new policy 1310, parental involvement, will be up on the school system site tomorrow. And there also will be an email address, separate from Ms. Giovanni, that you can email with your feedback. That is policy, POLICY 1310 at dpsnc.net. And that will also, again, all be available on our website tomorrow. We will have a public comment session on Thursday, November 9th, 2023, starting at 4:30 to 6:30. We'll be in this room, where people can also come and share their thoughts in person. We will make sure that we'll have staff here. I believe some board members will also be in attendance, so we can hear from the community and be able to draft the policy with the spirit of Durham. We know that we do parental engagement in Durham. That's been a focus of our work for so long. Parents' Bill of Rights ask us to write a policy. We're going to make it a Durham policy to make sure that we continue to hear from our families, every single one of them, and support their children in our school system. So that's the update on that. To be clear, 1310 is not in our packet tonight for people who are watching us, but that will be available on our website starting tomorrow.
Any other questions or comments from board members?
$1735. Should we talk about 1735, which is such a beautiful policy? I almost want to read it into record, but it is the policy that holds and is in place in Durham Public Schools at the moment with no changes. And so I look forward to ways that we can support and making that clear to our staff and families. But that one is not here for anything at this time.
That is correct. Administration will be bringing some proposed edits to policy 1735, the LGBTQIA plus gender supports policy, at the November 16th board meeting. And again, my email is on there. And so if anyone wants to provide any feedback, it will be available, just like the draft of that policy will be up as well.
Ms. Umstead?
I just have a few questions. These actually might be for Mr. Malone, so thank you for grabbing the mic. I do think there's a lot of questions and a lot of legal analysis around SB 49 and Title IX. And so can you kind of illuminate a little bit for us who decides what the who decides? I believe there is interference there, but who kind of makes that decision that the board will need to follow? Does that make sense? Who legally, I guess, can decide if SB 49 aligns with Title 9?
So we don't, and I don't, my light's not coming on here, but. Oh, okay, there we go. It would be our position that for all of the flaws with Senate Bill 49, that on its face, it does not violate Title 9. It is certainly possible that various school systems' implementation of the requirements of Senate Bill 49 could result in possible claims of violations of Title 9, but the language on its face, we do not believe violates Title 9. And it may very well take, a court or some other, entity that reviews complaints under Title 9 for them to provide some guidance.
Thank you. That's helpful. The other question I have, this is actually for administration. I think it's really clear that we need really strong procedures to go along with these policies to make sure that we are doing what's in the best interest of our students. And so I just want to know the timeline around the policies and procedures regarding, like, when will they be created? When will staff be trained? So we didn't make sure that our staff know what to do to make sure we can support students in the best way possible.
With Dr. Mavanga's permission, Dr. King and I, with his direction, Dr. King and I have been working on those procedures. Dr. King has kind of put together some drafts, but until we kind of get a sense of exactly where the board's going to land, it's a little bit difficult to kind of finalize those. But what I would propose, if the board would allow, is for us to come back on the 16th with a timeline for you on the implementation of those procedures and what the training is. I just don't want to kind of off the cuff provide that without consulting with Dr. Mabanga and Dr. King and the rest of the administrative team.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's really important that we get that done really soon. Regardless of what we do, we know that people feel in limbo right now. And so how do we give some really strong guidance to our educators around what should be happening within our school system? So I think, we can bring that timeline on the 16th, but I hope to see some urgency around how do we get folks trained before this January deadline. I think that someone has imposed on us, the state, I think.
And keep in mind that all of the bill did not get pushed out to January. I mean, the parts that are most problematic to most of us are in existence today. So.
Got it. That's helpful. I think some of our public comments shared about getting feedback from the task force. And so I would hope that we can send the date of our session next Thursday to task force members so they can be invited to that, as well as copies of these policies, 1310, to make sure the task force has an opportunity to talk with administration, with the board regarding all the policies. And potentially some of those procedures, right? If there's an opportunity that they can share with us some best practices, I think that'd be really helpful.
I would just like to point out that our principals have been, very good when they have encountered and been made aware of, I don't want to call it a situation, but of a concern of a student or a family, and have reached out to administration for, that case by case guidance. And the directive that they have been given is that, until told otherwise, policy 1735 is what we do in Durham. And so I do want to just point out, like, if someone does have a concern, I think families have reached out to the board members and they've shared it with Dr. Mabanga and other administrative folks, and we have worked with those particular principals. But your point is well taken, that there will be urgency around that and making sure that we bring the timeline that's not going to stop. Dr. Mabanga tasked us with this probably over a month ago. So we have been working on that, and we anticipate having something ready. I think we've gotten some additional guidance with tonight from the board, and with our other conversations around 1735 that I've had with board members as well.
And I think there's probably a both and that some people are coming to you and sharing like, hey, I'm in a sticky place. I'm not really sure what to do to be what's in the best interest of the children in my building, protecting them and be inclusive of who they are. And I think that some people aren't coming to you, but there's some harm being happening still in our schools. I think we're hearing that from people in the community. And so that's why I lean on like, how do we get really explicit and really clear? Because I think it's both and. I think some people are coming and I think some people may not be as well.
Thank you. Understood.
Just have another clarifying question. Mr. Malone, you said that it's your interpretation of the timeline that we are expected to comply with this aspect of the legislation now, not January 1st, because I want to respond to, like, thinking about some of the public comments we've received tonight, and as we're reflecting on these changes that we don't want to make. What is
Yeah,
our
and
timeline?
if you'll give me a second, I'll try to find exactly which portions were extended to January, but it's very limited pieces that were pushed out to January. I'll get that for you here if you give me 1 second.
Anybody else? Okay, go ahead, Ms. Cardine.
Another follow-up question about the timeline for providing the guidance. I know that our teachers and staff have been asking for that for a while now. I personally would feel much more comfortable making changes to our policy at the same time as or after our, aligned with when our staff have guidance. Like, I don't want a large lag time, and I feel like Chair Umstead did communicate that, but that would just feel more comfortable to me than to like put this into place and then leave that empty zone that's been happening basically since August, where folks just don't know what they're supposed to be doing, which could result in harm to our kids and staff.
And I think that is the expectation, and that was the directive and from Dr. Mabanga to Dr. King and myself, that, like I said, it was over a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, that we were to be working on these procedures so that we could flip the switch on both of those and start training once those policies were adopted. So like, we really can't do the procedures until y'all adopt the policies, but once you adopt them, we'll be ready to move forward with that guidance for our staff and that training.
Any other board members? Questions, comments? Ms. Chavez?
All right. So I think I just want to address some of the issues and concerns about this law that have come up and for many of us over the last few months, even though we're not talking about 1310 yet in the LGBTQIA and gender supports policy. But I do want to just say, because we're going to talk about it next week with our public hearing and all of that, that with the Parents' Bill of Rights, there are two pieces of it that are wrong. And that's the curriculum restriction on talking about gender identity and sexual orientation in particular for K through 4. And the other piece is the notification piece, where students are not allowed to have their own personal coming out process, but it is implemented for them. And so and I'm speaking on behalf of myself. But I want to say, as an out queer person who came out as a teenager and a queer parent, it's not right. And so we are going to do the best we can as a board and as a district to continue to honor and serve and care for LGBTQ students and families, kids from LGBTQ families, and all kids, because they have a right to develop and become whoever they are. And representation in curriculum is important. We are not inculcating our students. We are creating safe spaces for kids. And I know that I personally ran for the board in order to protect children and not to undermine their safety. And so with this law, I want to say that we are committed to implementing it, as Dr. Giovanni spoke about, in the best way possible. And any compliance is meant to be able to do things in the best way possible, and for there to be guidance about how to do them, rather than that left up to the individual. And I just want to say to our students, even though maybe many of you do not watch these meetings, but maybe if a teacher is or a parent is watching, you can pass the word. I want to say to our LGBTQ youth and all of our youth, but especially our trans and gender diverse youth, that I am sorry that we are seeing so many hateful legislation, laws that are being enacted across the country that target trans individuals. I am sorry. It is it's not the world that we want for you. And I would say, please stay strong, and that we honor you for who you are, and we will try to do right by you as educators and as a district. I think those are all my comments for now. Thank you.
Board members, this is your opportunity. Ms. Valladares, Ms. Lewis, do you
Yeah.
want to say anything or questions?
Can you hear me?
Ms. Lewis, yep.
So I don't have any questions, but I do want to just share that even though I'm not in the room with you all, I feel the heaviness and the weight that this is on our board, in our community. And I don't even want to come behind Ms. Chavez comments. I echo that completely. We will do the best that we can to honor and support all of our students in these times and what is presented before us. We are committed to doing things the Durham way, and with this compliance, we will continue to support our students and support our educators. So just thank you to all the conversations we've had. Thank you to the administration who has worked diligently, and our attorneys to present us with the best options for Durham. I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is Alexandra Valladares, currently traveling and just feeling the heaviness as well. I echo also what my colleague Emily Chavez said. I share the identities, many of the identities that Ms. Chavez, spoke of, and the intersectional ways that we share more than one identity, and it does hurt my community. To know that there's legislation that completely wants to erase families and students. It is something very painful, and as I look through all these policies, we have been very intentional. We have spent time with our attorneys. We have spent time with our administration, looking over all of these policies, ensuring that when it comes to harmful legislation, that we are on the side of protecting our students in the best ways. And so you will see some of the edits. You will see that, for example, if folks have questions about the policies that we passed, we have been very intentional about the kind of edits that were actually brought forth tonight. But this time is a time to also breathe. In the middle of everything that is happening in the world, where it's everything that is happening with lives. There are many lives that are at risk and at danger, continue to be in danger. And I am just saddened, and I do hold a lot of grief for the ways that legislation actually continues to target vulnerable community members, continues to put lives at risk, continues to put many children who suffer in silence and will not have a trusted adult to speak to because of legislation that pretty much puts them in harm's way. We face homelessness. We know what those statistics are. We know what the research shows, that many of our most affected youth, some of whom who are experiencing homelessness, actually share identities that are actually targeted by legislation like this. And it is something to grieve. It is not something to celebrate. And it is not something that is actually helping us meet our goal of serving, empowering, educating every student and giving them a fair and appropriate public education. It is not fair. And I just want to say that it is something that I appreciate my colleagues on the board. I appreciate Darrington Smith, our attorneys, appreciate our administration for that we have spent together looking over these policies, spent together sharing, examples of how we've seen things go left in ways that we do not, ways that actually do cause harm, and ways that we continue to uphold our commitment to mitigate harm, because we are a district that is inclusive, a district that is representative of many diverse families, of many intersectional identities. And we stay with that intersectionality. We stay with that day in and day out in order to provide a sound, a free and appropriate education for every child. And so I just want to continue to say that we will continue to engage in conversations. We will continue to talk to folks. We will continue to share the ways that we are actively working through systems, working through harmful legislation, working through, I will say, ignorance. And I dare do say ignorance on the part of folks who feel like this is actually a win when it is not. We don't win when we hurt others, and we do not win when we undermine the rights of any group. We do not win. I thank you all so much for this time.
Thank you. Thank you both.
If you care to get the.
Okay, Mr. Malone, go ahead.
But
with
no, I
your-
can wait
Go
till
ahead.
later.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. So the items that were delayed by the budget bill would be the school district's creation of a parent's guide to student achievement. That is pushed back to January 1 of 2014. The adoption of policies to increase parental involvement, that's your 1310 policy. That one was pushed back to January 1 of 2014. The provision of notice to parents of healthcare services offered at their child's school, that was pushed back to January 1 of 2024. The adoption of policies or procedures for resolving certain types of parent concerns, that new deadline is December 15, I believe. The State Board of Education's adoption of the items it's supposed to adopt related to parent concerns is pushed back to January 30 of 2024. And the board's reporting of the status of your policy adoption is now pushed back to September 15 of 2024. The items that were not changed are all of those things that are really the crux of the law, certainly that you are most concerned about, that being the K-4 instruction and the notice to parents regarding changes in pronouns and names. That is in effect currently.
Can we get clarification on that September date?
September 15th, 2024.
Okay, so there are two issues there. The policies themselves have to be implemented by whatever dates, either now, currently, or the January date. Your reporting your compliance with the policies adoption to DPI was pushed out. So that was originally September 15 of 2023 that you had to report to DPI the status of your adoption of the policies. They now just move that out a year. But the law requires them to be in effect either now already, or some of the ones that I read earlier were pushed out a little bit.
Thank you. That helps.
Does it though? Really? I mean,
Ms.
No.
Byer.
every time I've revised a policy in this district in the last 13 years, it has been to bring more justice and equity to this district. This has got to be one of the most nonsensical laws ever passed in the state of North Carolina. And the state of North Carolina has passed laws like everyone must have muscadine grape juice in school. I mean, so we know how to write dumb laws. This one is not just dumb. They're mean. They're bullying. They're targeted in a vicious way. And we are stuck in this weird place, right? Where we have just passed incredible, with the community's help, incredible affirming inclusive policy, which will continue to stand while we try to finesse language that attempts to address issues that weren't even happening in school districts across the state and nation. So we've been handed a pile of words that are nonsense. Parents already have rights and will continue to have rights, and we want parents to be very active parents. I mean, so, and they are, and especially in Durham. But we also know that factually, some of our most vulnerable and targeted students are in the LGBTQIA community. And so we will continue, despite around all of these nonsense words, to be protective and to do what is right. We are not taking books out of classrooms. We are not changing representative literature in our classroom libraries, in our school libraries, everywhere we go. And we have to figure out a way that the notification piece actually respects the identity and the rights that students have as individuals as well. We're talking about drafting a student's Bill of Rights. I haven't found one that I like yet, but I'm sure we can do that in Durham. The one that's giving me pause tonight is the health education. And so I'm wondering if there's great urgency in that, or if we can take some more time with that. And I know you all, the other thing that's giving us tension is that our administrators and teachers could face threats under these laws as written. And we do want them to have enough clarity that they know that they are safe with our policy protections to do the right thing. So we're in a strange land, wanting to do what is right. But the comprehensive health one, the 3540, is giving me the most pause of all of this batch. Most of these are just silly, but I don't know.
Thanks. Thank you, Ms. Byer. I want to remind us that this is just first reading. I haven't heard that we were taking action. I want to remind everybody that we have an opportunity in this space, really our community, to make sure and in our classrooms to make sure that we're educating our children about the importance of voting. Because to be clear, the people who wrote and are backing SB 49 were not elected in little blue bubbles like we live in. And that's not what this is. And so while we do feel like this violates the rights of our students, and we understand that, we also understand that it's important that we comply with the law that is in front of us. But we have opportunities to teach our students in various different entities in life to get involved with the electoral process so that we can work to get more people elected that won't pass laws such as SB 49. 2024 is an opportunity. Early voting right now, students, when they get a driver's license, can register to vote at the same time. We also should be encouraging kids voting in our school buildings so that we're teaching students the importance of being involved in the democratic process. So I'd like to see us collectively work to fight and overturn this so that we can support our students in the best ways possible. I'm appreciative of people being vulnerable and standing up in spaces. And we just have to do the right thing for everybody involved. I haven't heard a motion. But I want to remind folks that this is for first reading. We don't have to make a decision tonight. Any other discussion? Thanks, Ms. Giovanni. Ms. Carter Otten.
Just one more thing. I just want it to be, I just want to be clear. I think it's been said, but this is something for those who are here tonight who spoke. We have been struggling with this. We have had countless conversations amongst other board members and amongst community members and other entities in our legal team. This is not something that's easy for us, and it will continue to not be easy for us. We're stuck in a difficult place, as I've said, because we don't want to inflict harm in either direction, right? If we ask our staff to break the law, that could cause harm to them or to larger groups of people. So that's at the root of what feels really sticky point here. And it's frustrating because it's just the nature of local politics in a growing redder state, but we're stuck in this environment. Right? It's like gun policies. Like, we have to protect our students in our schools, despite the fact that our legislature passes not common sense gun reform, right? So just to say that, and that we're going to keep trying to think about this and try to protect our kids and our staff in the best way that we can in this really crappy environment. So thank you for coming tonight and all that you do.
Ms. Umstead.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor the point, but I just want to also echo a lot of what has already been said about the deep care that we have for our students and families. And I think this board is invested in any ways that we can support students and families. So please keep talking to us, keep emailing, keep calling us. Come to board meetings if you want. If not, we are happy to catch coffee with you or do something different so that we can still be in community with each other, because this isn't the first time there have been oppressive laws on our books. And what I do know is people know how to organize and wrap our heads around the young people who are impacted, the families who are impacted, the educators, and we also know how to advocate and fight at the statewide level to make sure these things are overturned. So I just want to know, we know what to do. We can do it, and we can make sure that our students are as safe as possible and our schools are as inclusive as possible for students and families.
Just for clarity for administration, we would, if it's the board's pleasure for administration to bring it back for a second reading on November 16th, it would be, the way that we would do that is with the motion from the board. But that doesn't limit us from getting feedback from the public. I want to make that clear that as frequently when we do this, we bring it, they have the conversation, they reach out, and then I can then bring that feedback. Like, I would bring these policies, and we've done this on various other policies and state that, you know, there was some feedback from this community organization or et cetera, and share that with the board, and then the board would have, a discussion if it so chose. And then you could either adopt it on the 16th, or as we've done on other policies, have a third reading for adoption. So those are the options, but in order for me to bring it back to the board, it would be helpful to have that motion. It's not a motion to adopt, just a motion for instructing administration to bring these policies back for second reading on November 16th.
I mean, the only thing I would remind the board is, which I'm sure you all know, which is what makes this all so frustrating, is whether you have a policy or not, it doesn't change what the law is in terms of K-4 instruction. It doesn't change what the law is as it relates to notice. I mean, that is the law, regardless of whether your policy aligns with it or not. So that's the only thing I would add.
Thank you, Mr. Malone. I don't. Board members, you've heard Mr. Malone and Ms. Giovanni's request for motion.
I'll make a motion that you bring it back for second reading.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Chavez and seconded by Ms. Byer to bring this policy update back to us for second reading on the 16th of November. All those in favor? Any other discussion?
Mr. Malone, what happens if we vote present or abstain?
I'd have to look at your policy to see how it handles abstentions. I can pull it up real quick. If you give me 1 second. Some policies count it as an affirmative vote unless you get permission to abstain, blah, blah, blah. But let me see how your policy addresses that real quick. Voting. I think that's it. Yeah, so your policy is similar to most. It says a board member must vote on all issues unless the member has a conflict of interest or is unable to remain impartial in a judicial matter before the board. So in this case, it would be unless you have a conflict of interest. A board member who wishes to be excused from voting, shall inform the chair, who shall take a vote of the remaining members present. The member will be excused from voting on matters involving his or own personal or financial interest or official conduct, and the reason for excusing the member will be recorded in the minutes. A failure to be excused by a majority vote of the remaining members present will be recorded.
That's helpful. I was looking for some piece for particularly folks that are part of the community to not to have to vote on something that is so offensive to their identity. So I was hoping to give folks some cover if they needed it, but it seems like only financial conflicts would get them there.
That's okay. So if someone abstained without permission, so to speak, that you can abstain. It's just it would be recorded as a yes, but the record would show that the person abstained. But then it would be recorded as a yes. So you could make the ceremonial abstention It's just that it would be recorded as a yes. I think I've said that 3 times now, so I'll stop.
Or- That's great. Or folks could vote no, which also might feel better to them as well. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, I did. As much as I think have so many problems with SB 49, I think the absence of our policy that will also require people to go to procedures that we were going to put in place also creates opportunity for harm as well. And that just kind of came to me as I sat here. And so I don't want to follow any of SB 49, but I think we can put a lot of the right procedures in place to support students and families. And so that's what part of my wrestling is like, we actually do need this because the vagueness right now or the lack of clarity is also allowing for people to do what they want to do. And I think that's also a problem.
Ms. Byer. Ms. Carter Otten.
Well, along those lines, we want, as we discussed, for Dr. Giovanni to be able to and folks to move forward with the guidance that we need and the clarity that folks need. So for that reason, and we don't want to keep operating in this no man's land space.
Okay, we will do a voice vote. The motion is to bring these policies back for second reading. Ms. Lewis.
Devine Lewis, and I vote aye.
Ms. Valladares.
This is Alexandra Valladares, and I vote aye.
Ms. Byer.
Aye.
Ms. Carter Otten.
Aye.
Ms. Chavez.
Aye.
Ms. Umstead.
Aye.
And I vote aye. It's unanimous to bring it back for a second reading. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is a summary of follow-up items.
Administration is to bring back the policies that were presented for first reading for a second reading to the November 16th board meeting. Administration is also to bring a timeline for the trainings. I believe that in order for us to comply with Dr. Mabenga's directive, we will have to have those procedures done by November 16th, or we won't be back probably. But so we will have those and to Dr. Mabenga for him to disseminate as his pleasure. And we will also work with Mr. Malone. That's what we were talking about with those procedures to make sure, because Maya is kind of the expert on this and we want to make sure that, and she knows what our thinking is. And so we're going to work with Darrington on that in the next few weeks or couple of weeks to make sure that those procedures are there so we can get them out to our staff and community and get some clarity and for families that are kind of in limbo. Did I leave anything else though?
I just a reminder to the community about next Thursday, November 9th, from 4:30 to 6:30 at the Fuller Building, 511 Cleveland Street. There'll be an opportunity to provide feedback on policy 1310, which will be available on the website about parental involvement, as well as the policies that we talked about and discussed tonight. So that'll be here in the Fuller Building. Also wanted to send a reminder, we want to send an invitation to the LGBTQIA task force about the meeting next week and to send the policy so they can provide feedback as well.
Thank you.
Move that we go into closed session for the reasons stated on the agenda.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Byer, seconded by Ms. Chavez to go into closed session for the reasons stated on the agenda. Any other discussion? Ms. Lewis.
Devine Lewis, I vote aye.
Ms. Valladares.
This is Alexandra Valladares, I vote aye.
Ms. Byer.
Aye.
Ms. Carter Otten.
Aye.
Ms. Chavez.
Aye.
Ms. Umstead.
Aye.
I vote aye. Thanks. We're now in closed session.
We are back in open session. We'll start first with the personnel report. Dr. Mavinga?
Board, I'm here to seek your approval for the personnel report as discussed in the closed session.
Move approval of the personnel report dated November 2nd, 2023.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Byer, seconded by Ms. Carter Alton. Any other discussion? We'll do a voice vote. Ms. Lewis,
Javon Lewis, I vote aye.
Ms. Valladares,
This is Alexandra Valladares, I vote aye.
Ms. Byer,
Aye.
Ms. Carter Alton,
Aye.
Ms. Chavez,
Aye.
Ms. Rogers,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. We also discussed the superintendent's evaluation in our closed session. And Dr. Mavinga, we just want to say thank you. We have much gratitude for you and your leadership here in Durham Public Schools. When you joined us, you talked about listening and learning from our community, and we see you continue to lean into that. As we have navigated a worldwide pandemic, we continue to recover. We continue to focus on what we know is important, our students learning and growing. We continue to center equity in all of our decision-making, and we take care and we have pride for every single person who works in this district, whether that be from our bus drivers, our mechanics, our classified, certified staff, central office. There is great pride that we take in working for Durham Public Schools, and that we are appreciative in your leadership as you lead our district. We know that you want to focus on continuing to grow our students academically and taking care of the folks that work here. And we really appreciate those being focus areas and priorities for you as we go into this next year. We would like to extend your contract for an additional year and also provide you with a $6,000 bonus, or excuse me, not a bonus, a raise. And as our token of appreciation for the work that you do in our district. And as you lead us with that focus on equity, with the focus on making sure our students can achieve, that we're a great place to work. So thank you so much.
Thank you, board. Appreciate it.
I'll take a motion to approve this new addendums to the contract.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Byer, seconded by Ms. Chavez. Is there any other discussion, board members? All right, we'll do a voice vote. Ms. Lewis,
Javon Lewis, I vote aye.
Ms. Valladares,
This is Alexandra Valladares, I vote aye.
Ms. Byer,
Aye.
Ms. Carter Alton,
Aye.
Ms. Chavez,
Aye.
Ms. Rogers,
Aye.
and I vote aye as well. It passes unanimously. And with that, we
We are adjourned.